here on the Military Summary channel. In this video we're going to discuss the most important events that took place during the previous 12 hours. We have a lot of very interesting updates, so let's start. And first we're going to talk about another massive missile and drone strike attack that took place during the previous night between the 29th and the 30th of October of 2025. And this morning this map was published. And here we can see the approximate routes of Russian missiles and Russian drones that were attacking the territory of Ukraine. And as you can see, this time they didn't attack just the eastern part or just the central part of Ukraine. They attacked the entire territory of Ukraine. Especially, the Russians focused their attention on the western part of the state. At the moment, impacts have been reported at the following locations in western Ukraine: Dobrotver Thermal Power Plant, Lvov region, Burtyshin Thermal Power Plant, Kalush Combined Heat and Power Plant, Ivano-Frankovsk region, Ladizhin Thermal Power Plant, Vinnytsia region. So the Russians attacked four objects of critical and energy infrastructure in the on the western part of Ukraine, and we understand that the Russians are trying to force Ukraine and to force European Union to capitulate and to accept Russia's demands. And the Russians carry out this attack almost at the same time when the Western media published a 12-point peace plan of the European Union for Ukraine and the Russian Federation. So this is the 12-point peace plan. Ceasefire to begin 24 hours after both parties accept the plan. Freezing of the current front line. Monitoring to start immediately under the leadership of the United States of America. Ukraine and the Russian Federation to agree on a non-aggression pact. Zaporozhye nuclear power plant to be handed over to a third party, then returned to Ukraine. Cancellation of symbolic sanctions against the Russian Federation. Agreement on the final line of confrontation, including arrangements for territories administered by the Russian Federation. Ukraine to receive international security guarantees, details unspecified. Ukraine and the Russian Federation to enhance mutual understanding and respect for linguistic, cultural and religious diversity. Start of negotiations on the administration of territories taken by the Russian Federation. Gradual lifting of sanctions against the Russian Federation as the plan is implemented. Ukraine and the Russian Federation to agree on compensations while the West unfreezes assets. So telling the truth, I don't see and I haven't seen even a single paragraph that will probably fit Russia's requirements or demands. Maybe just one, and we are talking about the 9th paragraph when Ukraine and the Russian Federation will enhance mutual understanding and respect for linguistic, cultural and religious diversity. So this paragraph means that most likely Ukraine will allow people to use Russian language across Ukraine. Maybe Ukrainians will stop attacking the Russian church, and maybe Ukraine will start attacking Russian history. So this is the only that goes in Russian favor, but everything else goes completely in Ukrainian favor. Not specified, no specifications regarding the guarantees, security guarantees, strange situation with the Zaporozhye nuclear power plant, and of course freezing of the current front line. Russians will not accept anything of this, and they will continue. Now let's discuss the situation on the ground. During the previous 12 hours we received lots of very interesting updates. And first let's talk about the Zaporozhye direction. During the previous 24 hours the Russians published this video. And here we can see how Russians managed to discover positions of the armored forces of Ukraine in the northwestern direction from the Zaporozhye front line. And when the Russians discovered the concentration of Ukrainian vehicles and tanks, they attacked this territory with Iskander missiles. Ukrainians suffered losses, and most likely lots of vehicles and equipment will not be able to get to the front line where the Russians are advancing. Furthermore, right before we started making this video, several sources reported that Russians managed to improve their positions and to capture another settlement on the Zaporozhye direction. So most likely this update we will discuss during the next video. Now let's talk about the city of Pokrovsk. During the previous 12 hours, the most important updates came exactly from this area. As you can see, the map has been adjusted significantly. So this is the situation by the beginning of the 30th of October of 2025, and from this perspective, from this configuration of the map, we have no doubts that the Ukrainians were completely caught in Cauldron by Russians without any chances for evacuation. So let's compare the map between the dates. So this is the situation by the end of the 28th of October of 2025. This is most likely, or maybe 27th of October. This is exactly a turning point in the battle for the Pokrovsk agglomeration. This is exactly the moment when Russians announced about the creation, or this is the first day of a Cauldron that was announced by Russians. By the end of the 28th of October, the Russians continue tightening the news around Ukraine positions. By the end of the 29th of October, we got first significant changes in the southern part and in the northern part of the city, and by the morning of the 30th of October of 2025, we have approximate situation on the ground which tell us that Ukrainians have no chances. As of the beginning of the 30th of October, it's very difficult to say how many Ukrainian soldiers are still there, but probably several thousands are there without any chances for evacuation. So now let's discuss everything in details, and first let's talk about the city of Mirnograd. And first let's discuss this video. This video this morning was published by pro-Ukrainian sources, and here we can see how Russian soldiers, at least in this episode, we can see 4 Russian soldiers that were moving between buildings, 1, 2, 3, and 4 Russian soldiers that were moving in the eastern part of the city of Mirnograd, probably under control of Ukrainian FPV drone. So this episode and this building was geolocated, and this is exactly the construction that the Russians answered. So Russians left this building, crossed the street, and answered this building. Based on this video, we came to the conclusion that everything further in the northeastern direction and in the eastern direction from this point was already captured by Russians. So based on this report, we have adjusted the map. This is the situation by the end of the 28th of October, and this is the situation by the beginning of the 30th of October of 2025. Now let's move further and let's discuss the situation in the city of Pokrovsk. Today we got, as you can see, we have adjusted the central part, the citadel, the territory along the railways. We came to this conclusion based on this video published by Ukrainian sources. And here we can see how Ukrainians were attacking this building. This is the building I'm talking about. So this building was attacked by Ukrainian units, by Ukrainian forces, and this is exactly the building. So this is it. So this is the building. This is the road that goes from the east in the western direction. This one, Dobropolskaya Street, and this is the Dobropolskaya Street on map. This is Shasseyna Street, and this is Shasseyna Street on this picture. So based on this video, we came to the conclusion that the Russians managed to secure the railway station and the territory along railways. Probably there are still, that as for now, nobody knows for sure how exactly the situation in Pokrovsk looks like. The Ukrainians are saying us about one thing, the Russians are telling us completely different things, obviously, and one thing is clear, that there are lots of pockets of resistance across the city of Pokrovsk, lots of pockets, lots of Ukrainian groups that were encircled without any chances for evacuation. The Ukrainians can't move, they're under complete control of FPV drones. So we have colored this territory as a complete control of the armored force of the Russian Federation, but saying the truth, we believe that there are lots of positions that are still under control of Ukrainian forces, but they don't have any chances and don't have any possibilities for evacuation. Furthermore, we have lots of changes that were provided by different mappers. The Russians improved their positions to the west and northwest of the city of Pokrovsk. They began moving along M30 road and M32 road, and this is exactly the place where Russians yesterday raised their flag on the entrance to the city of Pokrovsk, and this is exactly the place. I would like to remind you that later Ukrainians destroyed the Russian flag, and the Russians from their side strike back and they attack the Ukrainian flag in the same area. So based on this video, we haven't adjusted anything today. It's just another clarification of the situation on the ground. Furthermore, the Russians continue improving their positions in the northwestern part by taking more and more constructions and buildings along Ivana Mazepa Street. But all these updates are not so important. Even the progress on the ground around the settlement of Rih that was provided by neutral mappers and pro-Russian resources. Today, the most important updates are coming from the most northern part of the city of Pokrovsk. We're talking about the territory between the city of Rodinska along TO 515 road and the northern and the last Ukrainian citadel on the northern part of the city. So as you can see, today we have changes on the ground, and all these changes were provided by pro-Russian sources. So pro-Russian sources are saying that as a result of clashes, the Russians managed to answer the Zaporozhskaya Street. So this small part, the most northern part of the city of Pokrovsk, the Russians managed to capture this territory, and currently there are very heavy clashes. Furthermore, the sources are saying that Russians managed to improve their positions in the most northern part of the city around the last and the final city of Pokrovsk citadel. So the Russians captured these territories as well, or at least Russia's sabotage and reconnaissance group were recorded on these territories. And currently, if this information of course is correct, and if this information of course is truth, then the distance between edge positions of the armed force of the Russian Federation to the south of the settlement of Rodinska and in the northern part of the city of Pokrovsk is already 1 kilometer and 100 meters, which is obviously something impossible for Ukrainians to walk through or to break through. Ukrainians will not be able to go through these territories. They would be attacked by Russians, and they don't need drones anymore. They can do this with rifles, with mortars, and maybe with tanks, I don't know, but no chances for escape and for evacuation. Of course, we are waiting for additional updates. Today, the Minister of Defense of the Russian Federation will specify the situation on the ground. Most likely, they will provide us additional numbers. We expect that the settlement of Gnatovka would be secured by Russians completely. Maybe the Russians will tell us something about the city of Mirnograd. Furthermore, the sources are saying that Ukrainians were completely encircled without any complete chances for evacuation on the territory of the settlement by the name of Sukhoyar. The sources are saying that the units of the 25th Brigade of the Armed Forces of Ukraine were caught in Cauldron, and we understand that this is the most southern part of the Cauldron of this pocket. They have no chances, and nobody most likely even talk about their evacuation or any attempts to allow them to leave their positions. So these soldiers will stay there most likely forever, or they will try to surrender, because the Russians proposed several days ago Ukrainians to accept the terms and to surrender, but I'm not sure that this is a very good idea for some Ukrainians. So the situation, as you can see, is very complicated. Anyway, let's wait and see what is going to be during the next days. But one thing is clear, that Pokrovsk will fall much faster than expected, much faster. Nobody talks about the end of November. This is going to happen within days, maybe by the end of October, or it's like 2 days left. Maybe by the end of the next week, the city of Pokrovsk would be captured by Russians completely. Furthermore, today we got report that Ukrainians brought additional reinforcements and reserves in the direction of the city of Pokrovsk. Zelensky ordered Syrsky to unblock the city and to release Ukrainian soldiers from that pocket, but Syrsky denied, and he said he refused, and he said that currently Ukraine doesn't have enough of reinforcements and reserves to carry out this offensive or counter-offensive operation. At the same time, several sources reported that Ukrainians managed to restore control over the settlement of Dorozhny. But we see that Ukrainians, despite the fact that they continue their counterattacks, they stopped, they slowed down, they haven't managed to, let's say, cut to the northeastern flank. The Russians managed to stabilize the situation. Maybe the Russians were forced to retreat, but they managed to, let's say, stabilize the situation without any chances for Ukrainians to move further. So this is the situation in the Pokrovsk agglomeration, and we see that this battle is coming to the logical end. Now let's talk about the situation in the city of Siversk and around this area. During the previous 12 hours, we received lots of very important updates. The Russians, as you can see, managed to improve their position significantly to the south of the settlement. According to all these changes, the Russians are advancing right now in 3 directions. The first one on the line between Novostolovka and the city of Siversk. The second line along the railways from the settlement of Vyevka in the direction of Siversk. And the second direction is through the settlement of Zvanovka. So as you can see, we have confirmed and unconfirmed changes. When talking about unconfirmed changes, today several neutral mappers reported that Russians improved their positions to the west of the settlement of Novoselovka. The Russians are trying to shorten the distance to the southeastern and the eastern parts of the city of Siversk. Today, several Russian sources published this video, and here we can see the moment when Russians were moving along railways and how Russians were fighting with Ukrainians in this area. So based on this video, we have made small adjustments at this part. So this is the situation by the end of the 29th of October, and this is the situation by the beginning of the 30th of October. And the most important video is coming from the settlement of Zvanovka. Here we can see the video published by Ukrainian source, and here we can see how Ukrainians were attacking positions of the armored forces of the Russian Federation with FPV drones. Especially this moment is very important because this is exactly the building geolocated on the map that was attacked by Ukrainians. Based on this video, we came to the conclusion that Russians control already up to 20 or 25% of the settlement of Zvanovka, and the Russians continue advancing. Furthermore, several mappers reported that the Russians managed to improve their positions also along the river of Bakhmutka. So the Russians began their another offensive operation, this time in the direction of the city of Siversk. The situation is very difficult for Ukrainians. Most likely the Russians will create another Cauldron in this area, not in October, but probably by the end of November, we're going to start talking about the Siversk Cauldron. So right after the end of the Cauldron of Pokrovsk and the Cauldron of Kupiansk, Russians will begin the Cauldrons of Siversk and Liman. Anyway, let's wait and see what is going to be next, but it's very difficult to understand what Ukrainians are going to do with this. Furthermore, the Western media today made lots of very interesting articles regarding the situation. The Western media stated that's unpleasant to admit, but Ukraine will not hold out until spring. That was stated by the Times. As winter approaches, it becomes increasingly clear that it will be the last stronghold of Zelensky. Money for Ukraine's armament and heating is melting away. The West's willingness to support the war is fading. The defense of independent Kiev has slid down their hierarchy of strategic emergencies. New US sanctions have effectively led to rising oil prices. So the Western media anymore doesn't believe that Zelensky will be able to hold Ukraine and hold lines during this upcoming winter. And that's it for today. For the short video, Military Summary channel reminds we condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for watching. Subscribe to my channel, put your likes, join my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye bye.